My bad. My mic got muted. A weekend full of college football playoff chaos, college football playoff drama, and a lot of people that are somewhat pissed, but not really, at the G5. And we're going to break it all down. Welcome on in, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Southern Sports Scene. I am your host, Lucas Hill. Make sure you go on over and check out our sponsors over at FrostBuddy. Going over to frostbuddy.com and use our promo code SSS15 to get 15% off of all tumblers, cups, coffee mugs, whatever it is. Also want to thank our friends at Chike Nutrition. Get in the best shape of the 2026 year. Why not start it off with some good coffee to start off your morning? 20 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, 1 gram of sugar, all to help benefit you for your health goals. Going over, click the link in the description if you're watching us on YouTube and get yourself a nice little 10% discount. Garrett Armbrust, G5 Insider, joining us tonight on the Southern Sports Scene. Garrett, once again, good to see you, my friend. How are you this evening?
Doing good, man. Excited to talk some G5 ball. Appreciate you having me on as always. Excited to get into the conversation of some things that went down this weekend.
So let's go ahead and let's kind of start it off. And when we look at what we saw this weekend, and I kind of want to start it off with the conversations that were being had, the precursor during the week. I thought that going into a game, these two games, the line was very large. And I said when we did our previews and we talked about these games, it wasn't a matter of if JMU or Tulane was going to win the football game, which I never had in my mind that they would, but would Ole Miss and Oregon cover in both of those games? I thought if it was close, then you could make an argument that said, okay, the G5 deserves to be in the college football playoff. Now, after this weekend, it sucks to say I don't know anymore. I don't know if they do. And I'm not sure what the rest of America and what the committee is going to do over the break when this season concludes and they go into their meeting and say, what are we going to do to revise the playoff? And that concerns me a little bit, but at the same time, I'm not really surprised at this point. But Garrett, I wanted to get your thoughts on the weekend before we get into the reviews of each individual game.
Yeah, obviously for someone like me that, enjoys watching G5 football, obviously not the best weekend. The Ole Miss game, obviously they went down, both opening drives, pretty much scored immediately. I think the first drive they scored in less than a minute. Tulane kind of hung in there a little bit, but then it got pretty ugly in the second half. And then the Oregon game was kind of the other way around. It got off to a really bad start. Oregon went down again, immediately scored. JMU answered with a field goal. They got into the red zone, penalties backed them up, got a field goal out of it. Kind of hung in there a little bit for the first quarter. Things got ugly. And then the second half, they kind of outplayed them. You can say what you want about who was on the field for Oregon in the second half, but at the end of the day, JMU had, 500 yards of offense and played a very solid second half. But, the final score still being a 17-point deficit. There's still going to be a lot of questions raised, I think, after this weekend between what went down in those two games.
Well, let's go ahead and let's get into that one, Garrett. Let's talk about, first of all, Tulane and Ole Miss. Ole Miss pretty much dominated, man. And this was a 17.5-point spread going into this one. Ole Miss easily covering this one. And I said over when we did our previews that Ole Miss was going to come in and they were going to be pissed off going into this one. Pissed off about what happened with the Lane Kiffin situation, how everything went down over the last 2 to 3 weeks of the season. And obviously that weighed heavy on their shoulders during that weekend. Tulane, obviously a lot that happened. Coach Sumrall's father passing away. May our thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family as they progress in that situation, but pretty difficult end to what was a really good couple of years in the Summerall era. Like you mentioned, Garrett, Ole Miss goes down their first 2 drives, scores them back-to-back touchdown drives, totaling just 7 plays. They marched right down the field, and they got big plays out of it. Tulane shot themselves in the foot. They had methodical drives. They played the time of possession game, and I thought they did pretty well, like I expected them to. They were going to have to win the time of possession, and they were going to have to keep that Ole Miss offense off of the field. And for the most part, they did a really good job of mixing up their formations and mixing up different play calls that got that Ole Miss defense kind of sitting back on their heels. I thought Jamari McClure and Jake Retzlaff on that first drive really kind of set the tone for what they wanted to do with a 9-yard run, a 16-yard run, and then they went to the air. They're able to get inside the 40. They're able to get in close to the red zone. They're in scoring position. And Jake Retzlaff just throws a bad ball. Momentum killers in that football game. Look, the next drive, pretty much the same thing. You pass the Ole Miss 50-yard line again, and you can't do anything. Those are drives that hurt down the stretch of a football game. You weren't going to be able to do it against a team that is as dangerous as Ole Miss, and Tulane, unfortunately, found out in the hard way. What do you think of the first half overall from an offensive standpoint from Tulane early on, going up against one of the – I would say this is one of the worst rushing defenses in college football, but, of course, they've gotten better over time. But I thought early on they did a really good job establishing the run and establishing their presence on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I mean, the line of scrimmage is obviously one of the most difficult aspects for, a G5 team when they play Power 4 competition. Obviously, a lot of these guys at the G5 level, I mean, you have guys in skill positions that transfer every year from the G5 to the Power 4. Those guys are on every roster. The difference is the O-line and the D-line. Can Tulane's offensive line hang with Ole Miss's defensive line the entire game? And that's what's difficult to be able to do. As you said, Retzlaff, I thought he was off yesterday for sure. That was, I thought, one of his worst games that he played all season. I'm not going to say he was starstruck. I mean, he played Power 4 football last year. He was on a very good BYU team last year. He can obviously play, quarterback position at a high level. He just didn't look very good yesterday. I thought, as you said, they emptied the playbook a little bit. That was especially, too, what you saw in the JMU game. I mean, they pretty much emptied everything out on their first couple drives. And when you empty out your entire playbook like that, it's really just not sustainable to be able to do the entire game. The defense is going to catch on to the different schemes that you're running. But I would have expected them to come out probably a little bit better after watching the film of losing, by 35 points earlier this season. I would have thought that they would have been able to, establish some areas of weaknesses on defense that they felt like they could, find some holes, run some plays, and get some points off of that. But as you said, Pete Golding's team was ready to go. They were hungry, and they wanted to get a win, especially after everything that's happened for their program over the past month.
I think when you look at what the stats say, Jake Retzlaff throws for 300 yards through the air, but I thought most of it came in the second half. I thought Ole Miss kind of took away his ability to throw most of the game. But it doesn't help either that Tulane has 6 turnovers in the game, and it leads to 24 points off of those turnovers. That's a hell of a swing when you could go in and potentially get at least you left a lot of points on the field, man. And it hurts for a team like Tulane, which has already played Ole Miss. Like you mentioned, you'd have thought they went into the film room, seen what they messed up on during that first meeting, not really establishing themselves up front. Early on, did a decent job of doing so, and then over time, this Ole Miss defense just gets better and better and better. One game that I could kind of relate this one to is the Mississippi State game, where you see Ole Miss's defense kind of get off to a slow start against a mobile quarterback like Kamario Taylor. And then the second half, they completely take away everything that Mississippi State wanted to do with a guy like that. They got turnovers, they turned it into points, and they shut down an offense that had gotten better over the course of the season with a mobile quarterback. So early on, man, the turnovers hurt, and you probably had at least 12 points that you left on the board. You definitely left definitely had some missed opportunities in that football game.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you can't turn the ball over 6 times in a game where you're already, favored to lose there. Excuse me, you're the underdog in the game by, almost 3 touchdowns. So when you're giving the ball over to the other time 5+ times in a game, it just sets you behind the 8 ball. You're not able to catch up, especially when Ole Miss has elite players on offense. I mean, Kewan Lacey's one of the best running backs in the country. Trinidad Chambly has finished top 10 in Heisman voting. They have a wide receiver room that I thought's been pretty solid this year. Like, you're just not going to be able to catch up to them when you know that they're going to be able to score points on you. When you're turning the ball over, you're not going to be able to get in a shootout and be able to keep up.
What do you think of the response in Oxford? How did they respond to the G5?
Yeah, I thought it was an impressive response from Ole Miss, especially with everything that's happened with their program over the past month with Lane Kiffin leaving and obviously going to LSU. I think Pete Golding is one of those guys that's a real players coach. Those players were excited to go play for him. I mean, you saw when they decided that they were going to make him the head coach, how excited those guys were. And he was, a pivotal role on Kiffin's staff of recruiting. A lot of those guys went to Ole Miss because of the mission and everything that he sold them on. So I think they're really excited to go play for Pete Golding. I think he's going to be probably a really good hire. I think Ole Miss is going to be able to keep their momentum going. I think players, coaches like that, especially within a program that you hire with, usually go pretty well. And I think they're possibly going to go on a run. I think they're one of the better teams left in this field still. And I'm excited to see what they can do under Golding.
It's going to be interesting for sure. On the Tulane side of things, John Sumrall will travel back to Gainesville, and he'll get prepared for recruiting, obviously. Like I said, Tulane has been a hotbed in the coaching search. Willie Fritz, a couple of years ago, who's now at Houston, they just led them to an 8-win season this past year. Now you see what Sumrall did. Defensive-minded guy, really helped that defense turn a new leaf and really elevate themselves. And for what was supposed to be kind of a down year for Tulane this year, pretty much exceeded expectations that nobody really had much for the Green Wave going into this year. Now you hire a guy like Will Hall, and I'll be honest with you, Garrett, I don't like the hire. I thought that you kind of fumbled the bag whenever you hired a guy like Will Hall. And it's not just because of his track record at Southern Miss. People are just going to look at what he did there and how that program was. I thought he was in a bad position at Southern Miss because the donor support just simply isn't there anymore like it was now with Charlie Huff there. The thing about Will Hall is that wherever he's gone, has he ever had a good defense? No, he hasn't. I thought his offenses have underperformed at times, especially with him at the helm at some of these offenses. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a bad coach. I think he's been put in some really bad positions before, but obviously when you have this kind of track record, people are going to kind of count you out in instances like this. I just don't see a scenario where Tulane is going to come back next year and continue to be the leader in that G5 as the team to always look out for in the college football playoff if they're back in the college football playoff next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation, too, with Tulane because, I mean, before Summerall became the coach, I mean, they really hadn't had a whole lot of success. I mean, their success kind of just organically came really out of nowhere with him, and they started winning all these games, obviously beat USC in a New Year's Six Bowl a couple of years ago, make the playoff this season, win the American. But, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I thought it was a little bit of a puzzling hire. Obviously, as you said, didn't have much success at Southern Miss. A 1-win season there at the end. And then obviously, as you said, in Hattiesburg, they didn't have, maybe the alumni and donor support that they needed to be completely successful at that point in their program. And they obviously hire Will Hall due to him being kind of an in-house hire and a guy that I think players do enjoy playing for and working with. But it seemed like in a cycle where there are so many options, I would have probably liked to have seen them go elsewhere. Charles Huff, obviously, that was at Southern Miss. You let him go to Memphis. Jerry Mack obviously stays at Kennesaw State, signing an extension there. Even a guy like Ryan Beard that had success in his first season in the FBS with Missouri State gets a job at Coastal Carolina. So I thought there was a lot of places that they could have gone where people have sustained success over the past couple of years coaching. They went for a guy that hasn't been a head coach in a number of years, and the last time he did have a head coaching job, it didn't go great. But I do think Tulane's in a spot right now where they can sustain success, but year one is going to be very important because if they go 7-5 next season, I think you can see a lot of people really, losing out on this, not liking the hire, and things kind of start fumbling away for the Green Wave. So I think year one for him is going to be the most important season he'll have.
And people are going to forget about this. They had an opportunity to hire Blake Baker.
Right.
I thought Blake Baker would have been a great fit there. And
Yeah.
I know he's taken over as what that defensive mind that you need. I think if you kept Will Hall in his offensive coordinator position, I think you would have still been fine. But apart from that, man, again, like you mentioned, you're hiring from within. But how many times have we seen that backfire on a lot of teams? It hasn't been there. So I don't know how the donor support is going to be for Tulane. I know that you've had a lot of people that have invested in the program with Summerall. Can you sustain that? That's going to be the question that Will Hall and Tulane have to answer going into the next 6 to 7 or 8 months of the offseason. So it's going to be a long offseason for Tulane preparing for spring. So we'll see what kind of look they bring out by the time we get to March and April when springtime rolls around.
No doubt. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like you said with Baker, that was a name I really thought they were going to get him, with his ties to New Orleans and everything and being at LSU. But, Kiffin obviously able to retain him on staff. It's a big hire for LSU to be able to continue to keep him there and convince him there. To me, I think anytime you can get a head coaching job, that's going to be better than a coordinator role. You saw that at Ohio State with Hartline. He had one of the best coordinator roles in the country and goes to, the G5 to be a head coach. So I don't know if that backfires for Baker. I think that you can always help your trajectory, as a coach. If you take a head coaching job in the FBS, I think that's always going to be better than a coordinator role, but we'll see how it goes for him. Obviously, LSU is going to be a very good team next season.
Oregon and James Madison, the last one of the G5 matchups that we got today. We'll get into a little bit of Texas A&M and Miami after this, but I wanted to kind of highlight this, man. That JMU team did not quit whatsoever, and I have nothing but respect for that team. And Oregon still had all of their starters in the football game. That wasn't a done deal in the second half. Oregon didn't even pull any of their starters out, I believe. Dante Moore played the entire game. And they pretty much went blow for blow with them like I thought that this was going to be. The problem is that JMU got themselves down early and just couldn't respond until it was too little too late for them in the second half. So what were your thoughts on this game, Garrett?
Yeah, JMU's been, a very good offense most of the season. They kind of like to play around with their food at the beginning of the game. We saw that in the Sun Belt title game. I mean, you saw in the first half, you thought maybe Troy was going to beat them. And Troy was a team that was, frankly, kind of uncompetitive in some games down the stretch. They got run off the field against Old Dominion on a Thursday night, and you thought, is this team really going to lose to Old Dominion 33-0 and then win the Sun Belt championship? And then JMU, obviously, in the second half, it was all them. Same thing here. James Madison kind of gets off to a shaky start. They give up an immediate touchdown, but then they respond. You saw Alonzo Barnett pancake block one of the Oregon defenders on, JMU's first drive, and they marched it down the field. I mean, they opened up the bag. Dean Kennedy, JMU's offensive coordinator, pulled out all the tricks in the bag. They were running fakes. They threw a flea flicker down the field that worked. They were running reverses. They had motion. I mean, they had all kinds of stuff to throw off that Oregon defense. And they got into the red zone, backed up by penalties. That was kind of a lot of false starts throughout that game. And I understand when you're playing in an atmosphere like in Eugene, an atmosphere that you've never played in before, playing in that sound and creating that in practice is difficult to do. But they kind of screwed themselves over, I felt, on penalties a lot through that game on just things you couldn't do. There were multiple times when they got in the red zone and just backed up and had to settle for a field goal. And then they got down kind of, 13-3. And then kind of a PI call that I thought was a little bit egregious, kind of set JMU back a little bit more. Oregon got a free first down on that. JMU probably would have got off the field there. But yeah, they got down early, but then as you said, they came back second half, again, opened up the playbook, and the offense played great, outscored Oregon in the second half. And they just kept fighting and ended up covering the spread, obviously. I know a participation trophy of covering the spread doesn't mean much, but I thought they responded a lot better than Tulane did. I think JMU can hold their head pretty high. They scored, as many points as pretty much anybody has this year. They have more yards on Oregon than any team this year. And I think they can be pretty proud of themselves for a team that, most people didn't even think was going to make the playoffs until Duke somehow won the ACC championship.
Yeah, that was a JMU team that shot themselves in the foot with penalties, with what you gave up in the defensive backfield. Like you mentioned, Oregon scores on their first 5 possessions of the football game, and the longest drive of that one time-wise was 2:37. 4 plays, 68 yards. 5 plays, 75 yards. 3 plays, 78. 4 63. 5 for 80. And they thrived off of those. That's what Oregon's done all year long. The talent level was just so much better at Oregon, and I wasn't sure whether or not we would see guys like DK Moore or Evan Canty back in the football game or whomever. Didn't matter at the end of the day when you have Dante Moore that looked like a star on Saturday. They had him as the number 1 overall player in the 2025 or 26 NFL draft. I don't think that that's the case. I think you have at least 4 or 5 guys that are much better than Dante Moore. Now, guaranteed, he's probably a top 15 in quarterback, even though he has only 20 combined starts. And to be honest, he really isn't that good. That's just my opinion. But regardless of that, Alonzo Barrett came in. I thought for the most part, he fought his ass off. That was a very feisty Oregon defense that got after him. I know that the completion percentage isn't going to be very fun looking at, just 23 of 48, under 50% throwing the football. The 13 penalties obviously hurt you. But you had 500 yards of offense against Oregon. And this is not this isn't like last year's Oregon defense that got scorched last year against Ohio State. This is a much better defense this year that I thought for the most part did a really good job. Tosh Lupoi, this is one of those Tosh Lupoi defenses that is going to be really, really impressive and has shown really, really deep rosters. But again, JMU had opportunities in this football game early on. You get down early, and like you mentioned, Garrett, they play with their food on the first couple of drives. You saw it against Troy in the Sun Belt Championship. And I said if they do that, this is going to be a track meet for Oregon, and they're not going to be able to stop them. Second half was a different story. You finally get some momentum building, and really, you could have made this a one-possession game going for the onside kick if you don't have the blocked punt that gets returned for a touchdown, and if you're able to have a little bit more time off the clock and not kill yourself with these daggum penalties. So I thought for the most part that, again, they fought their ass off until the very end, prevented Oregon from even covering in this football game.
Yeah, no, Barnett obviously played really well. I mean, there were a lot of plays where he was running for his life. As you said, Tosh's defense was ready to go. That was, an excellent defensive line. It's no secret as why he's going to be the next Cal head coach. Obviously, one of the better coordinators in all of the country. As you said, this is an Oregon unit that's improved significantly over the past couple of seasons. Wayne Knight for JMU, obviously their running back. He had a good game. Sahir West, who plays on the defensive side of the ball for JMU, he was kind of a guy that was really highlighted in the Sun Belt championship. I think he had 3 sacks and 6.5 tackles for loss, something like that. Probably, obviously, would have liked to seen him get a little bit more involved in the pass rush yesterday. But again, winning up front for JMU is obviously going to be difficult. Those top 5, 10 teams in the country up front on the O-line and the D-line, it's a little bit different than, any other team that they've played this year. And not that their O-line or D-line can't hang, but it's just when you have so many guys like that up on the offensive and defensive line, even if you have 1 or 2 star players on your line, it's hard to hold up against an elite passer rush that's coming after Barnett every single play. It's great to see him healthy again because obviously early in the season when he was coming off, his surgery and coming back from his injury, there's no way he would have been able to evade pressure like that. Obviously in the Louisville game, he wasn't even the guy that they had the whole game. Him and Sluka were kind of splitting reps 50-50. I mean, I remember earlier this season they played Georgia State, and it was like a 10-3 game. Had no offense in that game. So the JMU offense got significantly better as the season went on. Once Alonzo got healthy, Wayne Knight, showed who he was in that wide receiver group for JMU. Really good all season. But, yeah, like you said, a lot of fight from that team. Could have cut it to 1 possession, especially if they didn't have the block punt. But at the end of the day, just too many penalties in the red zone, and you can't get down 2 scores early in the first quarter if you want a chance to win a playoff game like that.
Do you expect him to enter the transfer portal?
I don't know. I mean, I hope not, but it's one of those situations where, your head coach is leaving. So he's leaving. Your offensive coordinator, Dean Kennedy's going with him. He's going to be the next offensive coordinator at UCLA. It's a situation where, I understand a player leaving. I mean, your entire system that you've been under and developed is leaving, is gone. Obviously, they bring in Napier, a guy that, has had a lot of success in the G5 at Louisiana. Obviously, his latest stint at Florida didn't go very well. You've kind of seen DJ Lagway's regression at Florida. So I don't know if that's something that you want to look at if you're a quarterback playing under Napier's system, but definitely something that he's probably going to look at this offseason.
I'll say this, man. With Napier back in the G5, I would expect the continued growth in NIL towards JMU, even though that a guy like Napier's been gone from the G5 for some time, the support still is there for him. And when you compare it to what his predecessor or his successor is now dealing with at UL, I've heard from many fans that are UL fans that are pissed. I mean, pissed about where the trajectory of that program is. They're tired of 6 and 7 seasons the last 2 years. And be honest, man, I wouldn't blame them knowing that this was a top 25 team not too long ago. But that's what happened. But like that goes to saying JMU and Tulane are 2 teams of examples that have the support and the backing of their program because of what their predecessor left behind. But because of that, there's also the reality that there's some other programs that have had success with big-time wins and big-time seasons that they've had. They leave for other jobs, and their successor, I wouldn't necessarily say runs the program down, but brings them down to where expectations were initially whenever they began the season or began their tenure. And now you look at where they're at. That leads to less donor support. That leads to that money going elsewhere, man. And you're seeing it at UL. You're seeing it at many different programs, man. UL and ULM they're broke. Anything that's not a P5 program in the state of Louisiana, and this is just an example, or LSU and Tulane and whoever, they're broke in the FBS. You've got to be able to invest in your program. It starts with success on the field. 6 and 7 seasons are just not going to cut it for teams around the G5, especially if you want to contend to be one of those guys to contend for conference championships or contend for college football playoff appearances. So,
yeah, I mean, I think really the only G5 program that you've seen over the past really 2 decades that doesn't matter who their coach is that's had success is Boise State. And outside of that, you really haven't seen any team just be good every season. I mean, Boise State was down this year and still won the Mountain West. So, I mean, that shows you the level of success that they have at that program. And there's a lot of other teams that have had a lot of success over the past, say decade, but have had a couple down years. And Boise State's really the only team that hasn't done that. So anytime you make a coaching change and a new coaching hire, there's obviously the liability of what could happen next, the curveball of not knowing, but you kind of just have to trust your hire. As you said, Louisiana, they're not having the donor support they want. And then, you see everything went wrong for them this year. Walker Howard got injured. Sampson was out a lot of the year. And then you see their top 2 running backs, Zylan Perry and Bill Davis, enter the transfer portal. Hopefully they can keep Lunch Winfield. I thought he was really fun to watch in the bowl game the other night. I know that's not what we're talking about right now, but it's tough for these G5 teams right now because they're developmenting these guys and they don't get any benefit of it out of it. They just go on to the next program and really don't have a care in the world for the fact that they were developed by a G5 program for the previous however many years.
Lunch fought his ass off in that bowl game, dude. I mean, that was a kid you talk about coming off the injury, and he mentioned in his press conference afterwards that this was one of those games where they'd have to drag him off the field in order for him to really be off. Because when you have a healthy Walker Howard that's out on the field and is just not producing, and you've got a guy like Lunch Winfield that's obviously hurt, and he fights his ass off and he leads Louisiana to a possible game-tying touchdown all the way to the 5-yard line, that was impressive. But regardless of that, I bring up that pass statement, Garrett, to get to this. Should the G5 continue to still be considered for the college football playoff?
I do. In a 12-team, 16-team field, whatever we're going to do, I think they should have 1 spot. I'm not going to sit here and say that they should have 2 spots. This was a year you had 2 spots because the ACC self-cannibalized themselves into the fact that JMU got in. I mean, Tulane beat Duke, so you can't really say that Duke should have been in the playoff because
UConn beat Duke.
Right. Duke was not that impressive of a team. They got hot at the end of the season. I mean, most people thought they were dead 3 or 4 times, and then everyone was, oh, well, there's still a scenario that they could make the ACC championship, and you thought, not going to happen. And then it kept progressing and progressing, and next thing you knew, they were there. And then you were like, oh, they're not going to beat Virginia. They lost to them earlier in the season, and then they win. So that was just a situation that the committee obviously never saw. I think what they're going to have to do, well, I don't know that they should do it, but I think what's going to happen is auto bids are going to be done. They're not going to have auto bids if certain conferences get in this year because, frankly, Miami was the only team in the ACC that should have even sniffed the playoff. Maybe Virginia, obviously, if they would have won the ACC title. But, yeah, I mean, I think the group of 5 still deserves 1 spot. They play FBS. If you're in the FBS, you should have a chance at an FBS national title game. If you don't have a chance at a national title, what's the point of playing? I mean, I understand football and basketball are completely different, but the 16 or 15 seed in the NCAA tournament knows they're not going to win at all. The SoCon champion knows they're not going to win March Madness. But the opportunity for them to upset a team and to play in that first weekend is more exciting than playing, I think, in a G5 NIT style tournament. To me, that's a little bit degrading to G5 teams. Unless you're going to separate the FBS into 2 different subdivisions, which I don't understand how you would do that. That's the only way. Yeah, that's the only way that I see that happening. I feel like if you play FBS football, you should have a chance for a national title. If you play FCS football, you have a chance for an FCS national title. You can't just put the G5 in the middle and be like, well, they'll play for a G5 national title because it's not what they are. They're in the football bowl subdivision. So I think they deserve a chance. I'm adamant in that.
Here's my thing about this one. No, do not take them out of the college football playoff. I think when you expand it, however, you put yourself in a bad position. When you went from 4 to 12, that wasn't the right number. You should have gone from 4 to 8. I don't know if we're having this discussion about the G5 if you don't expand to 12. Now we're going to expand to 16 from what we're hearing, and now there's going to be even more. So what are we accepting now? We're accepting mediocrity in college football. We're allowing for, and we hear people say, oh, Duke deserved to be in, like you mentioned already, Gary. They were 5-5 with 3 weeks to go in the regular season, and they needed to win 1 game to reach a bowl game. How does that make sense? It doesn't. And it never will. Because when you have these people and these athletic directors and these commissioners of each respective conference. Now, I understand why the ACC did so and why each conference is going to do the same thing. With Greg Sankey being outspoken, with Jim Phillips saying, oh, well, Duke should get in over these G5 conferences. We hardly hear that from the Sun Belt commissioner or the American commissioner. Why? Because of... Okay. Because it's... How am I going to say this? Because the record shows what you put out on the field. The ACC has no room to even discuss about how they got screwed over. And for them to say, oh, well, Notre Dame got screwed over, you're not even in their conference, okay? They are an independent party that should be speaking for themselves. That's my opinion on this one. Don't take the G5 out and put them in a separate NIT tournament. That's stupid. What are you going to do? Take the 8 best teams of the G5 and put them all together and play a separate playoff? This ain't NC2A, bro. Put them in a freaking... Don't put them in a separate playoff. What is more important? Winning a BS title that you're the best G5 in college football, or a Cinderella run where you make a college football playoff and you're playing in prime time?
Yeah. Yeah, and you see a lot of these players too. If you played a G5 NIT, I think there would be opt-outs just as there would be in normal bowl games. I mean,
exactly.
I'm sitting here watching the Memphis-NC State game the other day, and they had guys, and no disrespect to them, I'm not a fan of opt-outs, but at the same time, I understand you want to preserve your NFL career. You don't want to injure yourself, whatever. I'm not a fan of it, but I'm not going to hate a player for doing it. But, you're sitting here and you're thinking, well, this is going to be a great Memphis-NC State game today. And then right before the game starts, Cortez Brame, he warmed up, but he's not going to play. Okay. Sutton Smith warmed up, but he's not going to play. It's like, okay, well, basically their 2 most important skill position players, and they're not going to play today. So now this game is over. It's like, and I don't care about it from the sports betting market at all in any way, but these people that do bet on games, they can't bet on a bowl game when the line comes out because some of these players opt out of the game 12 minutes before the game starts. So how are you supposed to predict who's going to win the game when you don't even know who's playing until basically kickoff? And I think in a G5 NIT tournament, that's what would happen. I think it's degrading to G5 teams. I think any JMU player would have rather played in Eugene last night on a 7:30 primetime slot underneath the lights than go play, against North Texas in however they do that. I mean, it would be a good game. Like, I would watch it. It would be a fun, exciting tournament, but it's not actually a national championship. It's just putting a bunch of, schools in a bucket and saying, we're going to see who's the best of all of you. Like, that's kind of the point of what bowls are. So why are we doing a G5 NIT tournament? I think it's stupid. I don't understand why you would do it. Even if only one group of 5 team makes the tournament, the 12-team tournament, at least they have a chance to win a national championship. Even though it's never going to happen, they still have a shot. They're playing for something.
What's even more egregious is that this is being agreed upon by national media outlets.
Yeah.
When you have ESPN talking about this, when you have other media outlets that I have had relationships with, when you have other media outlets, the Cover 3 podcast talked about this. Okay, well, what is more of an incentive for guys in the G5? Like you mentioned, is it playing in prime time in Eugene or playing in a meaningless tournament to say you're the best of the G5? That's more of an incentive to play in the CFP than it is to playing a meaningless tournament. That's what's so egregious to me, that this is being talked about and discussed around college football, that the G5 needs its own playoff. No, they don't.
Right.
You are ridiculous if that is even close to the case. And if they actually consider doing this, this is a slap in the face to the G5, and this is a slap in the face to those that work their ass off to get to that position.
Yeah. And the other problem too is they act like these G5 schools are like, don't have anyone that goes. Most of these G5 schools like JMU, most of these Sunbelt schools are state institutions that have 25, 30,000 students. I mean, JMU probably has, I would say, probably a similar enrollment size to the University of Oregon does. I mean, I understand their football program's not bringing in the same amount of revenue and money, but it's not like these teams are small schools that have like 1,000 students that go there. So I don't understand. You see people saying it's a safety issue for the G5. Like, do they not watch the regular season games and see G5 teams beat Power 4 teams every single season? Like, it always happens. But the second you get in the playoff, and this is another thing people talked about, was Tennessee got blown out by Ohio State last year. Oregon got blown out by Ohio State last year. SMU got blown out by Penn State. Like, there's no problem when that happened. But then when a G5 team gets in and loses by 17, the world ends. They should never, they get told they can never play again.
When a team like Oregon, who's the number 1 overall seed, gets blown out by Ohio State, then that's not a big issue.
Right.
Oh well, man. I guess that makes plenty of sense. But regardless of that, final college football playoff of the weekend that we need to discuss. Texas A&M going to play Miami. This one, in my opinion, this was a crappy game. And the winner of this football game, it wouldn't have mattered. They would have gotten slapped around in Columbus. And Miami pulls away with a victory, but this was an ugly game. No question about it. Marcel Reed, ever since he got injured against Texas, he hasn't looked the same. He made good throws, but they could not finish drives. The same goes with Miami. What do you think of this football game?
Yeah, it was an ugly game. I wish I really knew how much the wind was actually affecting, because the way they said it on the broadcast was like it was very much affecting them. And you saw the kicks, obviously. The special teams in this game were horrific. I mean, the JMU kicker, or excuse me, the Miami kicker missed 3 kicks. The A&M kicker missed at least 1. It might have been 2. He at least missed 1. And the one that he missed at the beginning was blocked. He basically just sculled it right into the defensive line on Miami that was blocking the punt. And I think it was Ruben Bain maybe that got his hand up and blocked it. But it's like, if you can't get points out of that, I don't understand how you deserve to win the game. At the end of the day, in my opinion, Miami just had better skill position players. You saw Fletcher was dominant in the second half. Obviously, Miami has one of the best freshmen in the country in Malachi Toney. Both quarterbacks were very underwhelming. Carson Beck missed multiple deep shots. Marcel Reed, they didn't really connect on many deep shots. I thought they needed to get Casey Concepcion more involved in the game. I didn't think they did a very good job of doing that. They targeted Mario Craver a bunch at the beginning of the game. Obviously, Le'Veon Moss still was not fully healthy. They were going, their backup running back Owens a lot. I don't know. It just seemed like the whole game was kind of messy, and then you got to the end, and then there was some offense that happened at the end. But again, Breed, a bad pick there at the end of the game that sealed it. Kind of thought he forced that ball in there. But yeah, just kind of an ugly game. Miami would have won the game by more if their kicker, would have made the kicks.
They probably would have won by more if they had been more consistent on their drives. That's the biggest thing, though.
Mm-hmm.
But like you mentioned, this is just not a fun game to watch, in my opinion. And you said that there was some offense in the fourth quarter, especially. I thought that Marcel Reed, with the home field advantage that they had going into this one, I thought that they were going to be able to capitalize off of what Miami would get them. And I thought that this was one of the better back sevens in the ACC that Miami had. And they pretty much proved it on the field. Yeah. They did a really good job of taking away the deep shots that Marcel Reed wanted to go attack. I thought that Miami should have established their run game a lot more. When you talk about Mark Fletcher going absolutely bananas against this A&M front seven that I thought was one of the best in the SEC that got after dudes in the run game. Casey Concepcion with only 4 catches for 33 yards. Mario Craver, 7 catches for 92, but he has 1 catch that goes for 59. If you take away that 59-yard run, he has 6 catches for 33 yards. So they were almost irrelevant. in the football game. And I was shocked that they didn't get enough touches. I was shocked that they only had a combined total of 11 catches between the two, especially when you went deep down the field. But that hats off to Corey Heatherman and company for being able to disguise a lot of different looks, because last week they mentioned on the broadcast this was a Miami defense that was blitz heavy with, Ron Roberts wasn't at the helm, but with their last defensive coordinator that was there. And then what Corey Heatherman brought in was a completely transformed secondary with a lot of young freshmen there too. So this is a young Miami team that, even though they'll lose a guy like Carson Beck at the end of the year, I thought that they did a really dang good job of being able to stay in the football game. And even though that Texas A&M would drive down the field, they had a bend but don't break type of attitude. They prevented them from getting 6. They forced them to go to try for 3, and they failed multiple times in that area. And I thought that there was a really, really dang good job. Hats off to that defense for what they did over the past weekend.
Yeah, really good defensive unit there at the end, especially that goal line stand. I mean, basically pancaked. Whoever caught it there at the very end, prevented a touchdown. Comes out of the game with concussion symptoms, basically, but he saved the game for Miami. And then obviously the pick at the end of the game. Obviously the back end of their defense very good. Jacoby Thomas, a guy that was at Tennessee last year, enters the portal, been massive to their secondary this year. I think that Miami-Ohio State game could still be interesting. Now, it's going to be very difficult to lock down Jeremiah Smith and be able to stop Bo Jackson in the run game and control Max Clare and people of that nature on Ohio State. But to me, Miami's skill position players are as explosive as anybody in the country. Malachi Toney can take, plays out of the wildcat formation. He can be in jet sweeps. He can get in motion. He can go downfield and run routes as a wide receiver. He can do pretty much anything. Mark Fletcher was dominant in the second half. Keelan Marion and C.J. Daniels, very good wide receivers. I think that if they can mix up enough things and make that Ohio State defense a little bit confused on looks, I think there's a chance that Miami can stay in that game and make that a very competitive game. And I've been higher on Miami, I think, all season than a lot of people. I picked Miami to win this game over Texas A&M, and I'm going to be really excited and interested to see what those skill position players do for Miami.
It was Mohamed Toure with the hit. Dude, it wasn't targeting. And people are going to complain and say that, it was targeting. It wasn't. He led with the shoulder. And it didn't hit contact the head or neck area. So, perfect hit, man. You can't help but compliment what that defense was able to do in the last 30 seconds of that ball game. That was a heck of a hit and a heck of a play to keep that A&M offense out of the end zone when it mattered most.
Yeah, especially after giving up, the drive where they went so far down the field. A lot of teams wouldn't have been able to let them, stay out of it. But they knew that, they still won the game as long as they didn't cross over the goal line, and they kept them from doing that.
Let's go into our early previews of next week's college football playoff. Miami going to Ohio State. 9.5-point spread. I expect this one. This is obviously opening odds. I expect this one to kind of be around the 8.5, 7.5 range when it comes to the line. Garrett, what do you have in this football game?
Yeah, I think Ohio State's going to win this game. I think their team's just extremely good across the board. Ohio State's only lost this season, obviously, to Indiana, the number 1 team in the country. Julian Sayin has been the better quarterback, I think, most of the season, if not all of the season, than Carson Beck. I understand that he has the best wide receiver room in the country to throw to, but this is just an Ohio State team that's been there and done that. This Miami team, this is the first time they've won a playoff game. I think Miami, I would take them for the points. I think they keep it within a touchdown. I think it's a very competitive game. I think this Ohio State team, though, that's coming off a national championship, especially after losing the Big Ten title last week, or 2 weeks ago, I just find it very, very I just don't think they can lose 2 games in a row. I don't think that's possible for a Ryan Day hungry team with Jeremiah Smith and everybody to lose 2 games in a row. I just don't see it happening.
Ohio State with a 385 money line. The over-under on this football game is 41.5, so that's interesting. I think this might hit the under, man. I don't know if, just depending on what Miami's defensive line is able to do against Ohio State. How does Ohio State respond? That Indiana defensive line got after Julian Sand. Part of that was because Julian Sand's holding on to the football way too long. But we'll see what Miami's defensive line could do. I thought they showed out against Marcel Reed. He was basically running for his life most of the time, trying to create plays. He held on to the football too much himself, and it led to 7 sacks. So we'll see what happens in that football game. Oregon going to Texas Tech. Who you got in this one?
I'm going to lean on Texas Tech in this one. I've been high on them all season. I think they have the best linebacker room in the country, obviously, with Rodriguez and Bailey. I think they're going to be able to get after Dante Moore. I think they have a lot of offensive pieces in Cameron Dickey and Baron Morton and Caleb Douglas and so many guys that can play hard. I think this Texas Tech team has been one of the most slept-on teams in the country all season. Their only loss, obviously, was when Morton was not healthy and Will Hammond was playing at quarterback. So this is a Texas Tech team that I legitimately think has a chance to win a national title. Obviously, Oregon looked very dominant against JMU for the first half, but Oregon's been a team to me, honestly, most of the season. I don't think I've been as high on them as a lot of teams. I understand that they've won games in a multitude of different ways. They beat Iowa in the pouring down rain in a way to do that. And then obviously a high-scoring game against JMU in a shootout. But there's going to be points scored in this game, I think. But I think Texas Tech ends up getting it done.
Yeah, this one is not going to be a shootout whatsoever. I expect this one to be a very, very evenly matched football game. Over-under in this one is 52.5, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. I might be leaning with you, man. The more and more I look at Texas Tech, the more I think that they are a complete team. The reason why I say that is because I look at what, like you mentioned defensively, David Bailey is one of the best edge rushers in college football. You look at what J-Rod was able to do, obviously robbed of the Heisman Trophy. Let's shut up about Diego Pavia. That's that's the best defense in college football right now. I thought Oregon, after what they did offensively, kind of getting shut down a little bit in the second half against JMU. I know it's JMU, but it's not just them. Look at what they did against Wisconsin, who was very mediocre. What could they have done with a consistent offense and with a healthy quarterback? Look at what happened with Indiana. I would say that Texas Tech and Indiana are pretty much neck and neck when it comes to overall in that defensive category. I think they're very close to what both bring. I think this one, though, is going to hit the under. I think that Oregon's going to get shut down defensively. I think Texas Tech, if they're able to get 6 instead of settling for field goals, they have a legitimate shot to win this football game. I think they finally do it. Shell Wood going up against Will Stein is going to be the mind game of the week for the quarterfinals. Alabama going to Indiana facing off. Indiana 7.5 point spread. I was surprised to look at this one and being a 7.5 spread. Over under in this one is 48.5. Alabama with a plus 250 on the money line. Indiana with the minus 265 there. Now, by the way, for the money line for Texas Tech, Oregon minus 118. Texas Tech minus 102. Who you got in that one?
Alabama and Indiana.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to go Indiana in this one again. Alabama's inability to rush the ball is concerning to me. Ty Simpson played a lot better in the second half. Started getting the ball to Jeremy Bernard and Latsier Brooks. Latsier Brooks is going to be the future of that Alabama wide receiver room. Extremely high on him. Jeremy Bernard, real deal NFL prospect. But the fact of the matter is Alabama, with the Jam Miller injury this season, has not been able to effectively rush the ball. Through the SEC championship game in the first quarter of the Oklahoma-Alabama game, they had negative rushing yards in those last 5 quarters. If you're one-dimensional on offense against this Indiana defense with D'Angelo Pons and Tucker and Aiden Fisher in the linebacker position, I just don't see how you're going to be able to win the game. This is an Alabama defense that got through Oklahoma. A couple bad throws by Mateer. Obviously, the horrible interception as the half ended in the first half. the missed one throw that he had on 3rd and 3 with the man downfield where he evaded pressure. But to me, Alabama had a lot of secondary breakdowns. If you have that against Elijah Surratt and company in Indiana, you're going to get picked apart. It's going to be another game where it's going to be close. I don't think Indiana is going to win the game by double digits. I think it'll be around a 7 to 8 point victory, but I think Indiana gets this game. I think they win this game, and I think they're in control of most of the game.
Let me tell you about who the X factor in this football game is going to be, and it's Charlie Becker. How many times have we seen number 80 and number 15 connect when the game is on the line? They did it against Penn State. They did it on 2 separate 3rd downs in that football game to get that offense rolling. The last one, which pretty much sealed the deal for Indiana to win the Big Ten, and early on in the first quarter to set up their first scoring drive of the football game. Fernando Mendoza is going to make big throws tonight. They are. I just have a great feeling about this. I think that with what Alabama's defense did last week, or on, what was it, Friday that they played? Yeah. So with what they did on Friday, it concerns the hell out of me. The reason why I say that is because this is not what an Alabama defense is supposed to look like. They're not supposed to give up big plays in the run game. Early on, they didn't necessarily do that, but they have at times throughout the season. Indiana is not necessarily a run-first type of team, but Roman Hemby can run between the tackles, and he gets big plays. You talk about Kalen Black, who has had some pretty good runs himself. Both of those guys are going to be utilized a lot this weekend. If they're able to run eastbound and down against this Bama defense that has struggled at times to establish their presence on the defensive line, they're going to struggle. If they can't run the football effectively against one of the better front sevens in college football, they're not going to win the football game. I understand that Daniel Hill got hot late in the football game, but guys, overall, they have not been able to run the football with the Jam Miller injury. And I'm not saying that Daniel Hill's a bad running back, but God dog it, offensive line has underperformed this year, and he has underperformed this year. He's not what Jam Miller brings to the table. Give me Indiana in this football game. I think that they find the big play at the end of it all, and Fernando Mendoza continues to showcase why he's one of the most clutch players in college football this year. Ole Miss and Georgia. I will be in New Orleans for this football game, so excited for this all SEC matchup. Winner will play. Who will they play, Garrett? God dog it.
Yeah, I haven't really looked at the bracket. I just see the games.
They'll play. Will they play Indiana or Alabama?
I think it's got to be Alabama. I think it's a Georgia-Alabama rematch can happen before the national title. Because you can get Indiana and Ohio State again in the national title.
It'll be an Ohio State or Miami game that they'll get in their respective semifinal.
And I think this one's for the Peach Bowl. I want to say the winner of this goes to the Peach Bowl. I think I'm not 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens in this football game. Trinidad Chambliss coming off of a really good game last week. I thought that defensively they really did a really good job of shutting down Jake Retzloff and his legs, like we mentioned earlier in the show. I think that they're able to make this one a competitive ball game. A little rematch ahead, but I think that this Georgia offense is just continuing to get hot. I think Gunnar Stockton's making his name known as one of the more underrated quarterbacks in all of college football. Heck of a story for him. Had to sit behind a couple times behind Carson Beck last year, came into this season. I had a lot of questions for Gunnar Stockton this season. He's proved me wrong in every single aspect that I had him in. And boy, has he turned this offense around and helped them reach new heights. I like this Georgia offense and what they're going to bring against Ole Miss. Let's see what they do against Prince William and Malin, though, who's coming off of a really, really damn good game. What does the health of their offensive line look like? That's the question that I want to have answered for Georgia. This is not like Alabama's defensive line. They're not as good off of the edge. Ole Miss is much better, and they proved that this past weekend. And I know they played Tulane, but still, what they've been able to do most of the season, it's been impressive. But again, this is another bad rushing defense. What do you have in this football game?
Gonna go Georgia again in this one. Going with the favorite, I guess, in all 4 games this next weekend. I just feel Georgia's playing as hot as anybody in the country right now. Their defense is played significantly better as the season's gone on. I think their secondary might be the most improved unit in all of college football. From the Tennessee game where they gave up 30 points to 30-plus points to the Alabama game in the SEC championship where Alabama could not move the football laterally at all. It's an improved unit. You're going to see Georgia get the ball to some of their playmakers. Zachariah Branch is going to have a big game in this one, I think. One of the best screen specialists just in the country. Just get him the ball on a screen play and let his legs take off and get you 20, 30 yards. I think he's going to be able to rip off a couple big plays in this game. This is a game where I think Georgia probably wishes they had a guy like Colby Young that got injured early in the season in their wide receiver room. But you know how Georgia is. They use their running backs. They use their tight ends. They don't take a whole lot of explosive plays downfield. They just kind of wear you down and get 5, 6, 7 yards on a lot of plays, have 7, 8-minute drives, and beat you that way. I think their defense is going to be able to show out, and I think Georgia ends up winning this game probably by a touchdown to 10 points.
You mentioned this already. They like to wear down defenses, and I see a scenario where this happens again. Give me Georgia to cover in this one just by a touchdown. But I do think that this does end up in, I wouldn't necessarily say a shootout. Over-under in this football game, if I can find it, I think it was over 52.5 or so. I think this hits the over. I see this being a 31-28 type of game, or it could be a 35-28 type of game, whatever it is. Georgia manages to cover when it's all said and done. I think that they make the big play at the end of the day. And I think they established that run game that was kind of been hampered by injury. I know that a guy like Chauncey Bowen, he should be back healthy. We'll see what happens and what his situation is, but it doesn't matter when you have a running back room that is as deep as Georgia's. Nate Bell's been popping off recently, and he certainly had himself a hell of a ball game in the SEC championship, being utilized in a lot of different ways. And what's even better about this Georgia rushing attack is that these running backs aren't just running back by committee. They're utilized in a lot of different ways. Get them out in the receiving game, screens, excellent in pass blocking, blitz pickup. Those are the type of things that make for a solid running back room that Georgia has been so well known for over the past 5 years of the Kirby Smart era. So really impressed to see what Georgia brings to the table. Really excited to get down in New Orleans for that football game. But guys, that's going to wrap it up for us here on the Southern Sports Scene. Garrett Armbrust joining us once again. We appreciate Garrett for hopping on in here. You can follow him on Twitter at 4th and Saturday. Our G5 Insider brings you the best of the group of 5. Covers with Kicking It with the Grid over at Gridiron Uncensored. And look, he's been on a roll. And dude has had 15, 25, 30,000, 100,000, almost 1 million views on a lot of his tweets. He's becoming slowly but surely one of the best voices around the G5. So we always appreciate Garrett for hopping on with us. Thank you guys so much for hopping on in with us. As always, you guys are the best fans. Make sure you all do us a favor and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Turn on the bell notification so that you are notified every time we go live here on the Southern Sports Scene. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, stay blessed. Don't stress. Y'all have a great rest of the week. We'll see you guys soon.